NBA is an up and down game. A gambler's kind of sport where the greatest player of all time is a man who's still paying off the bookies 2 decades after he retired. The beauty of a game with ups and downs, developmental hurdles, and pitfalls along the way is that there are potential risers and fallers with each passing season. Players who individually are poised for a boom in value, and those who are so far down the fickle NBA community's shit list that their price per share is pennies on the dollar. Much like the NBA is the stock market, constantly fluctuating, changing in ways only a select few can predict. Those of you who are chomping at the bit on who to buy the hypothetical stock for and who to bail out on before the season begins, fear not, because I have a war chest of 6 players today who you should potentially buy low on and stash for the time being, and some players who you might want to sell before their value dips even lower than rock bottom. This isn't me trying to give you expert fantasy advice or to go out and invest in cards from these players. Just when someone tries to tell you that they were on the hype train before anyone else, you can turn around and say that you were the motherfucking conductor. Let's roll out the red carpet for our first batch of players. These guys, people have almost entirely clocked out on. They are the ultimate litmus test of who really watches the NBA and who hops on FanDuel and peeps the box scores before placing a 7-leg parlay. A pair of players where there was almost no discourse on what their value is in the NBA landscape, and no one is chiming in to defend them. These two gentlemen, I would hold on to their stocks as they're both in for an upswing and resurgence like no other, and everyone is going to be scrambling to pick up their shares that are still flowing in circulation. The first man on the docket is Zach LaVine. Young Hollywood. Flight number 8. He's been somewhat of a volatile topic as of late. He's been battered and bruised, left in the dust of the NBA community. The idea that Zach LaVine, however, has fallen off a cliff is a bit overstated among us. He is not too far removed from an all-star selection. The 2022 NBA season feels like it was yesterday, and the eye test favors above all else, so let's take a second, put aside the statistical decline, and let me sell you on Zach LaVine. You ever heard of tween hezzy splash? LaVine's bag is as deep as the last Pringle in the can. A silky smooth athlete with a handle to boot. A jumper that's as soft as Charmin 10-ply. The ability to rise up and confidently seal the game. He's literally a hooper's wet dream. So if we're doing contextless eye exams, we have to add some asterisks as well. Yes, the efficiency has dipped slightly, and the injury resume has added some experience on it. But with DeMar's departure, the Bulls attempting to patch things up with LaVine, and the eventual disappearance of Vooch, I foresee a bounce back to near all-stardom from the high flyer. I'm predicting the shooting percentages take a jump, the backdoor lobs from Giddy to skyrocket, and we see a very bad but very fun Bulls squad roll out for 2025. I'm going to spoil this one early for you. Yes, this is another Chicago Bull. Yes, it is Josh Giddy. Josh Giddy, the diddler, has lost a lot of respect from the NBA community for both his on-court and off-court antics. Let me be clear, we're just discussing his on-court play and nothing about what happened in the courts. Before I give you the pitch, though, who the fuck gave him these nicknames? He's got Slob Wizard, Timothy Chalamet, Wizard of Oz, Vanilla Magic? Like, come on, like, he was just asking for it at this point. Anyways, Josh Giddy, with a new environment around him, a fresh start, and a change of scenery, might be just what he needs. He's honestly still one of the most creative passers we've got in the league. While the jumper is coming along, it's the aggressiveness at hunting his own shot that was most surprising for me from his time in Team Australia. I genuinely was shocked at how much more comfortable he looked in the open floor, and I can only imagine that kind of confidence moving forward will expand even further when he suits up for the Bulls. If you've still got any shares in Giddy, hold on to them tight. I predict we'll see a jump in his counting stats across the board, and maybe even a little maturity in his next girlfriend. Moving on to the next category, these two players are more along the lines of 50-50. Some of us have all but given up on them getting into relevancy again, while the other half of us still cling on to hope that they've either got plenty left in the tank or are just getting started. First up on that pie graph of criteria is none other than Klay Thompson. Now, let me put this big old asterisk right here and say Klay was part of one of the most dysfunctional Golden State rosters we've seen in a long time. They were grasping onto any semblance of a rotation. Kerr was out of his damn mind, and quite frankly, it's no wonder Mr. Thompson felt genuinely disrespected by this display. Hell, I would have been too. In Klay's worst version, most unfortunate condition, and terrible circumstance, he still put up 18 a game and shot 39% from 3 on 9 attempts a game. Klay is who he is. A flamethrower who has regressed defensively, and someone who isn't going to pound the ball up top and create his own shot. And what I'm about to say is by no means disrespect to the best shooter of all time in Wardell Curry, but playing with Luka at this point might just be flat out better for Klay's game. Klay has the off-ball game down to a science, and he fed off of Curry's gravity for 4 championships. But Luka's playmaking plus gravity at this point dwarfs what Klay would be getting next to Curry. I'm just saying, humbly, I believe, and without disrespect, that Luka at this point is an overall more beneficial partner to a guy like Klay than Curry is. I think we see Klay get back to his plus 40% three-point shooting on massive volume, and I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if we see Klay score more than 20 a game next season. The second man in this line of thought is the savior of the Detroit Pistons, Cade the Blade Cunningham. Okay, so hear me out for a second. Cade's improved at almost every single facet of his game since he entered the league. He steadily improved as a shooter, especially in the mid-range. There was no doubt of his passing ability. Hell, that was one of the things he was touted for, but his comfortability working with a crumbling and mismatched offensive scheme has also really impressed me. Now, Cade still has his dejectors. If he was everything he was supposed to be, then he should be able to take a suboptimal Piston squad at least into the play-in and do some damage. Well, yes and no. I don't think it can be understated just how dogshit the roster construction this Pistons squad has been in the past 3 years. They have had some of the worst spacing, worst tertiary ball handling, and some of the most oralist coaching in Monty Williams I've seen out of a basketball squad in this past decade. They finally moved on from Killian Hayes, so that's a plus, but aside from that, this Pistons squad has done nothing to really put anything alongside Cade. The additions of Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. are laughable, non-needle movers, but at least it gives Mr. Cunningham 2 players who can sometimes find the bottom of the basket. To close out the stock exchange for the day, we've got 2 players who I truly believe are the most poised for the biggest jump in value and price per share. 2 players who have shared a change of destination, albeit a more home-like environment than we previously thought, but who are nonetheless going to strive in the new colors. I'm of course talking about RJ Barrett and Mikal Bridges. Let's start with the one we have actual film for, RJ. RJ's had a resurgence. He looked like the second best player on Team Canada squad that housed Jamal Murray and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He was a man possessed at the tail end of the year for the Raptors, and now that he's had a full offseason to really cut those teeth even further, I dare say we might see RJ make that all-star jump he was supposed to take when the Knicks drafted him. The Maple Mamba is still only 23 years old, and now that the Duke of York has become the honorary prime minister for the Raptors, I feel like we're more than likely going to see a more well-rounded version of RJ. Let's not forget, in the 32 games he played for Toronto, he put up 22, 4, and 6, shot a blistering 39% from 3, and looked like he was finally coming into his own. This iteration of RJ is going to be one of those players who you wished played like that when he was still on your team, because he's going to be killing New York in the playoffs come 2026. Hold on to your RJ stock because it's only going up from here. And finally, the Golden Boy, the Warden, Go Gadget, Noodles, Brooklyn Bridges. Well, I guess that one doesn't really fit anymore, but Mikal Bridges is reunited with the Villanova boys and has found himself at home as a New York Knick. Let's start with the basics. You have an all-defensive, uber-efficient 20-a-game scorer who no longer has to deal with Dennis Schroeder and Dennis Smith Jr. as his lead guards. Let's not forget, Mikal Bridges is a man who finished second in DPOY voting once upon a time, has played more than 70 games a year since he's been in the league. Well, actually, he literally has never missed a game, and is easily one of the best plug-and-play guys in the entire NBA. In short, you've got OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, 2 of the most versatile 3-and-D players, uber-charged with the perfect rotation around him in the same fucking lineup. There's going to be some rough stretches at the 5 for Randall and Jericho Sims this season, but for Mikal, this is an easy jumpstart into a bounce-back year where we see him make an all-defensive first team in his new duds as the Knicks take the first seed in the East as we round out the season. Look, there's plenty to be uncertain about and gamble on as an NBA fan. which is why I leave you with 6 of my picks for players you can claim to have been ahead of the curve on in all of your group chats.
This has been Mitch over at 2for1 Hoops. Until next time.